Live from the Senate floor, you have been watching Democrats push, debate, and prepare to force what happens to, or what appears to be rather, a futile bid to enact voting rights protections and legislation right now. Republican opposition not wavering here as Democrats are continuing their cry to counter what they say is widespread voter suppression. And now what you are seeing is Democrats laying out their plan one by one to try and steer around GOP obstruction right now and force a vote. You've been watching major leaders within the party, including you heard from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer at the very beginning there, actually implore a procedural shortcut trying to avoid a Republican blockade that has really stalled this voting rights legislation for months now, forcing it to the Senate floor here for debate. Now, with that said, Democrats are still short of the votes needed to win passage here, lacking the votes needed in their own party to change Senate rules and enact it unilaterally. Let's continue the discussion and bring in ABC News political contributors, former Democratic Senator from North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, also former acting DNC Chair Donna Brazile, along with Michael Waldman as well, the president of the Brennan Center for Justice. Michael, Senator Mitch McConnell, just moments there before what we're listening to now, said that there is no evidence that states are suppressing the vote. That was what he was hammering home there in his remarks. What do you make of what he had to say? Validity?
Well, I wish that were true, but unfortunately there is plenty of evidence. Driven by the big lie, driven by Donald Trump's claims of a stolen election, we see states across the country passing laws that make it harder for some people to vote. 19 states last year passed new laws to restrict the vote in one way or the other, 34 new laws, and many, many laws are now up for potential enactment in other states. And even worse than in some ways, or a new twist, is laws that would change who counts the votes, that would put the power in the hands of partisan state legislators. That is a real rebuke of our democracy. It's a major political clash that we're seeing today on the floor of the Senate. These states rushing forward to pass these restrictive voter laws. Congress has the power to act legally and constitutionally to stop it, to set national standards, to protect against racial discrimination in voting. The question has always been, does it have the political will? I personally think there's no choice but to try to force the issue as they are doing right now. It's never going to be easy, but it's extremely important.
And again, just Senator John Thune there on the floor giving his remarks. Heidi, your reaction, a rebuke of our democracy?
I think absolutely. You know, there's this kind of head in the sand analysis that's going on the Republican side. This is all being driven by the big lie, and it's smart for them to begin with a story about how I accept the election results. But we know the majority of Republicans in this country and the majority of Republicans in the Senate continue to advance a theory that Joe Biden wasn't duly elected and somehow there was massive voter fraud. And as we move forward, we need to understand that part of this is the federal franchise. We are picking federal leaders, national leaders. It has been appropriate. It was appropriate in the 1960s when there was voter suppression for the federal government to step in with voter reform. It's appropriate now. I think it's so interesting, this like holy grail of the filibuster that, as Dick Durbin said, has been amended 100 times, that there are exceptions, things like budget reconciliation, and this idea that you just can't touch this, it'll destroy the Senate, is really not supported by the facts that for so often we have changed this. We changed it for trade promotion. We have changed it for budget reconciliation. We just changed it a couple months ago for debt limit challenges because the Republicans didn't want to vote for the debt limit, but wanted to obviously not ring that bell of violating the full faith and credit of the United States. And so, you know, let's put this in perspective. Let's have the debate. I think it is absolutely powerful what's going on right now in the Senate because you're hearing both sides of the issue. It's smart that they're advancing people like John Thune. He makes a persuasive argument. I would love to see him debate Dick Durbin. I think that would be more educational than anything else that would go on in terms of voter suppression.
And when this Amy Klobuchar, you can see now at the mic giving her remarks, but Donna, Senator Chuck Schumer, started off the morning around, I guess it was about 10:15 Eastern time, pointing to the history of voter suppression against African Americans. He mentioned once again Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and that was a pivotal day for Democrats as they talked about voter suppression and talked about this legislation. How big of a role does that play within this debate, the history of African Americans?
It should play a very large role. Look, I'm looking at the Constitution of the United States. My grandmother was born some 17 years after the 1870, the 15th Amendment was institutionalized in our country. It gave blacks the right to vote, but yet she was a female. So at the age of 32, when the 19th Amendment was passed in 1919, my grandmother still could not vote. It took the 1965 Civil Rights Act that allowed my grandmother to vote. And as a little girl, I watched her. I watched my dad. And I tear up at this moment, not because I'm a crybaby, and God knows I don't whine. I tear up because she was an embodiment of what it was to be an American, to see her sons go off to fight for this great country, including her baby boy, my daddy. He got 4 Bronze Stars and UN Medal for Valor, and he still could not vote in his country until 1965. Here I am, the former chair of the Democratic Party, not once, but twice, but I fought inside my party. Heidi knows this, to ensure that nobody in our party would ever deny the right to vote. So I am proud of every Democratic senator, even those who are opposed to filibuster reform. I am proud that they are on record as supporting voting rights and voting expansion and access, because it will not weaken the integrity of our elections. It will make this document a living document so that my grandmother's grandbaby and her future grandchildren, great-grandchildren will never be denied this right, simply because of what state they may live in. This should be institutionalized, that we're never denied the ballot. I was a little girl growing up in my beloved Louisiana, going door to door after we heard the news that we could vote, reminding everyone that there was an election coming up and that they could register. Finally, they could register, and don't be afraid to register, because we now have the right. Prior to that 65 Act, they were afraid that they would not come home. They were afraid that they did not have the money to vote with a poll tax or literacy test. And yet I was the first Black person in this country to manage a campaign, because that right was achieved in my lifetime. And so give us the ballot. That's what Dr. King said. Give us the ballot. We don't want a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot. Just give us the ballot. The saddest part about this day, Kira, is that this is a debate between partisans. This should be a debate about our birthright. My birthright. The birthright of my grandmother, who could not enjoy this right until she was well into her 70s. Well into her 70s, 78 years old. 78 years old to get their voting rights. I saw that. I witnessed that moment. I saw those tears. Not understanding as a child what it meant, but I understand now as an adult why I must fight for it. And you're not going to take my rights away. I'm going to still fight for it. I'm going to still encourage people to vote. Don't silence the people. Mitch McConnell said, don't silence the lawmakers. Don't silence the people. Give us the ballot. That's all we've asked for.
Well, you don't have to ever worry about being silenced with us, Donna Brazile. We always appreciate the passion you bring to these discussions. Heidi, Donna, Michael, we will all keep talking as we follow the continued debate there on the Senate floor.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.